Hello, welcome to the Friday, September 6th, pumpkin spice flavored episode of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, Iowa needs a new lieutenant governor, Libertarians make their case in court, and a Western Iowa pastor has some thoughts about Donald Trump. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin.murphy, the Des Moines bureau chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. With me this week, we got the full roster at our disposal. Gazette deputy bureau chief Tom Barton is here. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Erin.
Sarah Watson of the Quad City Times is with us after a few weeks off. Good to have you back, Sarah.
Thank you, Erin.
I shouldn't say off. You were very busy with work is why you were away from us. Off was not the right word. Jared McNett of the Sioux City Journal is with us. Hello, Jared.
Ahoy, hoy.
And finally, we have Gazette columnist Todd Dorman, who's bringing in football season with his Hawkeye shirt from Ray Gun. How's it going, Todd?
It's going great, and it's still not a fair catch.
All right. Before we get started, I wanted to do a quick little survey, which was inspired by a recent Todd Dorman column. Show of hands, and then I'll clarify for the listeners, the non-YouTubers here. How many of y'all are pumpkin spice fans? Okay, just Todd and Sarah. Bailey, our producer, weighs in with a very milk toast sure.
Negatory, Aaron. I've actually grown to loathe pumpkin spice over time because although I love the fall season, especially Halloween, I really hate how quickly people pivot from summer to fall now, and pumpkin spice is like the harbinger of that. So real distaste for all things pumpkin spice.
Yeah, I haven't had one yet because I think it's still a little too early. So I agree with you. Yeah, I haven't. I'm not the kind of fan that rushes there and like waits overnight or something to get a pumpkin spice latte.
I guess I have to ask, are we specifically talking about pumpkin spice lattes, or is this just like, because I really like pumpkin pie, pumpkin muffin,
blow it
pumpkin
wide
bars.
open.
Yes, I am all for those. Yeah, I don't always, I mean, I don't mind pumpkin spice lattes. They're not like my favorite thing ever, but I do love a good pumpkin pie, pumpkin muffin, pumpkin bar, pumpkin pastry treat.
They've gone it's like anything else. It goes too far, they ruin it. I think isn't there like toilet paper that smells like pumpkin spice and just other ridiculous items that have no business smelling like pumpkin spice now do.
Man. Yeah.
So
I saw a pumpkin spice breakfast cereal once last year. I remember being a little worried about that.
Just make a pie. I mean, that's a healthy breakfast.
Yeah, I love a good pumpkin pie. Pumpkin flavor stuff in general, I haven't really gotten into. Like I said, other than pumpkin pie. But so my wife and daughter love the pumpkin spice lattes.
Sarah was right with her pick of pumpkin bars. That's really the best of the pumpkin desserts.
Yeah, they're good.
Okay, now that that's settled, as the great 21st century poet Marshall Mathers once said, let's get down to business. Our number one topic is Iowa's number two in command. Lieutenant Governor Adam Gregg announced early this week that he is resigning to take a job outside of government that will allow him to spend more time with his family. Shortly after that announcement, it was revealed that Gregg has been selected to become the next president and CEO of the Iowa Bankers Association. And by the way, I've heard a few whispers that someone hit the send button on that latter announcement about a week or two earlier than was originally planned. So, oops. Tom, you wrote about this for us. Why does this matter? What's next? And what has Governor Kim Reynolds had to say about her timeline for choosing a new lieutenant?
So Reynolds spoke to reporters in Des Moines yesterday, a day after Lieutenant Governor Adam Gregg resigned. The governor said that she has a couple of names in mind to replace him, but is in no hurry to name a new lieutenant governor. She wouldn't say who was under consideration to replace Adam Gregg, who, as you mentioned, resigned effective immediately on Tuesday to take a job as the incoming president and CEO of the Iowa Bankers Association. The group advocates for, provides resources to, and lobbies on behalf of Iowa banks. The governor said that she wants to make sure that she takes the time to get the right person, saying that she wants to make sure that her office looks at who might, be good potential candidates and assessing kind of, I guess, what they want to focus on. So until the governor makes an appointment later this fall, Iowa Senate President Amy Sinclair, Republican from Allerton, will be next in the line of secession. The governor said that Gregg informed her last Friday that he had had the opportunity to become the next president and CEO of the Iowa Bankers Association. The governor said that she supports Adam Gregg's decision to step down to focus on his family, calling the position a very demanding job that requires a lot of sacrifices. She said that it's been a tough 7-year stretch for the both of them, punctuated by devastating natural disasters, including flooding, tornadoes, a derecho, as well as a global health pandemic. Reynolds, it's worth noting. So I guess your first question about this is, why is this important? Why does it matter? The governor wouldn't say if she plans to seek reelection in 2026 and what her considerations might be for picking a potential running mate or someone to possibly run to succeed her as governor. And I guess, that's why this announcement, one, is surprising, came as a surprise, came as a shock to political observers, but also two, why it matters in terms of who she is going to pick to succeed Adam Gregg. The governor was asked if she was surprised that Gregg is leaving politics altogether and will not run to succeed her. Her response is that, she, like most governors, picked Adam Gregg with the assumption that he would be ready and willing to take that next step to serve as governor, should that happen, but that there's never any guarantees that that's going to be the process. And then she ended by saying that ultimately it's going to be the people of Iowa who will decide who the next governor is going to be.
Yeah. So Todd and Tom alluded to this a little bit. This comes at a very interesting time for multiple reasons. And one is that Iowans are about to be asked on the November 5 ballot whether to amend the state constitution to clarify that the lieutenant governor, even when appointed as a replacement, like is about to happen, is in the line of succession, gets put into the line of succession. So if that constitutional amendment is approved, it's not difficult, it's not even remotely a stretch here, to imagine a scenario in which Donald Trump wins the November election, becomes president again. Kim Reynolds picks a new lieutenant governor. Trump offers Reynolds a post in his administration, and now Iowa has a new governor that was not elected in any form by Iowa voters. Should Iowans, Todd, be okay with that hypothetical?
I would be surprised if that's the way it panned out. A couple of things, you hear that Kim Reynolds doesn't have a lot of interest in going to Washington. So there's that. And second, how long will Donald Trump grind the axe after Reynolds
That
endorsed?
that that was my thing too.
Yeah, yeah, and after she endorsed DeSantis, so he kind of carries that stuff around for a while, unless it's politically expedient in some way to name her to something.
Well, let me put it this way then, because that's a fair point. You're absolutely right. But I want to get at that, the way that this could play out with a lieutenant governor becoming governor who was never elected. So say something, and God forbid, but say something happened physically to Governor Reynolds, she couldn't be governor anymore. Now that recent pick becomes governor, was never on the ballot, was never voted. This was one of the concerns that was expressed when that constitutional amendment was debated, and now it's a very real. I mean, it's a legitimate possibility. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on whether that concerns you in any way.
Yeah, it happens though. There are people that aren't elected that get by this some sort of flow chart fall up, I guess is what you would call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was at the 1857 Constitutional Convention, which I covered. they basically didn't say anything definitive. There were some that wanted the Secretary of State to be next in line, and there
Mhm.
were some that wanted the Lieutenant Governor, and so they just didn't, it wasn't a concrete line of succession.
Yeah.
So they also didn't put right to bear arms in the Constitution. I'm like, what? Were they hitting the bars in Iowa City a little early in the afternoon? What was going on?
That's in the federal one. We don't need it. Let's go have a beer. So let me give you a separate scenario there here that's more in line with what Tom was talking about here, and it talks about 2026. Todd, that Reynolds completes her term as governor, but opts not to seek another term, which is also a possibility, creating an open seat election for governor in 2026 in Iowa. In that case, you could make the argument that her new lieutenant governor pick coming up here would have something of a head start in that 2026 Republican primary. Should we view this upcoming choice, Todd, for that Kim Reynolds faces through that lens? Is she about to pick who she would like to be her successor? Should we
Well,
think of it that way?
yeah, you have to think of it that way. For one thing, she's going to want to pick someone who, if they become governor, will stick with her program and protect her legislative legacy. Who that would be exactly, I've heard. The funny thing is, the only name I've heard is like Michael Busolo. Could I?
Wow.
I was surprised when I heard that.
Okay.
And then you've got some women in the legislature, Chris Knoyer, Annette Sweeney. It's got the ag background. So or maybe she goes outside the legislature. Maybe she takes her good friend Tiffany O'Donnell and makes her Cedar Rapids mayor and makes her lieutenant governor. I don't think that will happen, but she wants to. I don't know that she necessarily is going to necessarily wants a direct, descendant. Guess that's not the word I want, but
We shouldn't assume that whoever she's going to pick, she wants to clear the ballot and be the
yeah,
nominee. We should not assume that. Is that what you're saying, Todd?
yeah,
Yeah.
probably. But she's going to want to, pick someone that if they decide to do that, then they're on the same page with her.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about whether, if she doesn't run, whether Brenna Bird runs
Mm-hmm.
for governor. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
Brenna Bird's going to be a lieutenant governor. I think that would be a big mistake.
Right.
uh,
Hard to
but
see that.
and Trump says she'd be a good governor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the other flow chart is that Reynolds doesn't like that, would rather pick somebody else.
Yeah. Jared, you're loaded for bear there. What do you got?
So I was curious about this, and I wanted to see if there are any numbers. And this is a little bit old, but I found a study from 2013 that looked at lieutenant governors who sought the governorship. This was going from like the early 90s through 2013, and the record was 17 wins for such people and 38 losses. So
Wow.
by no means a guarantee that
Yeah.
that's going to be a glide path to becoming governor.
Well, and
Yeah.
the other factor is when this happened, I thought, yeah, I should probably write something about it. But then I thought, I've never written about anything about Adam Gregg yet, and so maybe I should just not do it. And it's not that he didn't do anything. He was on some initiatives and a few
Right.
here and there, but it was telling that all of the glowing complimentary farewell statements that everyone made, you couldn't find a single issue in any of those statements. It was just, he's a great guy, he's a nice guy, he loves his family. Okay, well, those are all good things, but he did not have a policy heavy record that you could run on for governor.
When I initially saw the was it a release at first, like a press release, right?
Yes. Yep.
When I initially saw that about spending more time with family, I had to smile and just remember a line of a journalism professor of mine who said that a politician never voluntarily steps away from office merely to spend time with their family. And then I smiled even more when I saw the further development that like Tom had in his story that it was going to be with the Iowa Bankers Association.
Right.
Yeah, ka-ching, ka-ching.
Yeah. And look, in this case, both things could be a little bit true. That
Oh, totally. But
yeah,
just that's usually
right.
it's not the only reason.
He didn't do that first and then go looking for a job. Clearly,
Yeah.
The two were made to happen. Yeah, exactly.
According to Tom's reporting, he's getting quite the pay increase, or potentially, I guess, looking at previous association leaders. So
Right. Absolutely. Todd, to your point, the one thing, if there was anything he was most visible on, it was the rural Iowa initiative that he sort of oversaw. That I don't know what they call that, legislative panel, task force, whatever it is.
Yeah. Empower Rural Iowa.
Yeah,
And-
that was maybe the biggest thing.
Well, he also did lead the governor's criminal justice reform task force. So before becoming lieutenant governor, he was a state public defender. He was the Republican nominee for attorney general and was defeated by longtime Democratic incumbent Tom Miller in 2014. Yeah.
Yep.
And then after losing that election to Tom Miller, then Governor Terry Branstad appointed him to be the state public defender. So because of his background as an attorney and his background with the state public defender's office, he also headed up the governor's. I'm trying to think of the name of the committee. I think it was the Focus Committee on Criminal Justice Reform.
Did anything come of that? I mean, I was thinking about that too when I saw that.
Was that the one
He
that
had led
produced
that.
the I don't think that was the one that produced the 2021 bill. I think that was a separate. Forgive me if my memory's failing me here, if someone goes out and fact checks me. So I don't think that bill that they did was that 20 or 21 when they did it in the
20.
wake of the George Floyd 2020. I don't think that was a result of the Focus. I think that was a separate group that got together in the immediate wake of that and did that. Maybe they built off of what the Focus group had done. I'd have to go back and check that. That's a good question.
Yeah, that's my recollection. But again, I'd have to go back and check that. I know that they did put out recommendations to reduce recidivism through, successful offender reentry programs, but I can't remember what those specific recommendations were. I vaguely recall, and I think that this was maybe a priority of Adam Gregg's when he was state public defender, of broadening support for like specialty drug courts in the state and veterans courts. I think that may have been part of the recommendation.
Yeah, but to that, I mean, and sorry, go ahead, Todd.
No, I was going to say there was a lot of bipartisan oomph behind sentencing reform at one point, and then when Republicans saw rising crime rates, or they're not rising, but what they say are rising crime rates, and saw that it was an effective issue against Democrats to talk about how unsafe the cities are and stuff. All that sentencing reform stuff kind of fell by the wayside.
Yeah, that train has definitely slowed down. To the bigger point about it wasn't dissimilar under Terry Branstad. Kim Reynolds was not exactly forefront on a lot of things in her 6-7 years as lieutenant governor. She kind of operated similarly to her predecessor in that way Kim Reynolds did, and where she was, took the lead and managed the bulk of the ship, and the lieutenant governor, was the person who went to this town or that town when the governor couldn't, and appear on behalf of the administration and do those kinds of things. And frankly, that's probably that kind of travel schedule is probably part of the reason that factored into Adam Gregg's decision, if you take it based on what he said in the statement, in the press release.
Yeah, and that was one thing that the governor said to reporters yesterday in Des Moines, and also I, for my article, spoke to University of Iowa political science professor Tim Hagel, and that's one of the things that he noted is that, traditionally in that lieutenant governor role, which is not statutorily defined in Iowa code and, under the Iowa Constitution, the lieutenant governor essentially performs duties assigned by the governor. And, at least in modern history, in most recent years, the focus on that position has been someone who is, as you mentioned, able to travel a lot, get
Yeah.
out there to parts of the state, particularly small rural communities that the governor just isn't able to get to or can't get to as often, right? And kind
Right.
of be
Right.
more of a visual presence in, those part of the states outside of, Des Moines and your major metropolitan areas and kind of the big events, right, where the governor is expected or has an obligation to be,
Yep.
and is able to, articulate the governor's positions. And
Right.
so, that means a lot of time away from home, missing kids' ball games and practices or what have you.
Yep. Yep. It's instead of one line at the end of the job description, it's an entire job description based on other duties as assigned. That's all it is. All right, but obviously this is a story that's going to have legs for the coming weeks, months. Really, we don't expect a decision on Reynolds anytime soon on that. It's possible not even until after the election. So we'll obviously be watching this and see what plays out. Moving on now to the courtroom, which is where I just came from as we sit here and record Thursday afternoon. The three Libertarian candidates for Congress made their case in Iowa District Court to remain on the ballot for the November election. Loyal listeners to the podcast know well that a couple weeks ago, the state objections panel, by a 2-1 vote, disqualified those Libertarians from the ballot over objections to the Libertarian Party of Iowa's candidate nominating process. Libertarians have challenged that panel's ruling in court, and Thursday afternoon was the hearing. Erin, give us your thoughts. Oh, wait, that's me. Sorry. So, I don't know that we heard anything in the arguments today that were super new. It was mostly around the same stuff. We've heard the Libertarians say that the state panel overreached in its ruling and also argued that the panel was outside its boundaries in acting on this specific kind of objection. They also argued that the objectors, the people who filed the official complaints, didn't have the legal right to do that. The state and the objectors' attorneys argued that obviously the opposite of that, and argued that the law allows for any voter to file a complaint, and again argued that the Libertarian candidates are disqualified because their delegates were improperly nominated. They held their convention too soon, essentially, and so the candidates should be disqualified because they were improperly nominated. I think what's most interesting about this is destined for the Supreme Court in a really, really rapid fashion. The Iowa Supreme Court. The judge said, and he acknowledged as much, he essentially said, I recognize that this is probably going one more step, so I'm going to give you a ruling as soon as humanly possible, which is, kind of reading between the lines, sounded to me before the weekend. And then I have heard, and I haven't been able to confirm this, but I have heard that the Iowa Supreme Court will take this up next week. And the reason for that, if you're not following this story closely, is auditors have to start printing ballots very soon. They have to mail ballots to overseas voters and the overseas military within a literal couple of weeks here. They need, in those 3 of those 4 congressional districts where these are being challenged, they need to have answers on whose name is and is not going to be on those ballots so they can get them printed and have them in the mail. I don't know if there's anything y'all want to discuss on this. I mean, it's just kind of an update. We've talked about this pretty extensively on recent podcasts. Is anybody curious about what happened today or what happens next?
Well, and forgive me if I missed this, but so it's you have 3 Libertarian candidates running in 3 of Iowa's 4 congressional races. So there's 1 congressional race, right, that doesn't have a Libertarian candidate. Can county auditors then in that district go ahead and print and send out those ballots?
That's a good question, and that was actually one of the things that was brought up today, Thursday afternoon, during the arguments. The state asked that if the judge does uphold the injunction and if the Secretary of State is not able to start printing the ballots in those 3 districts, they asked the judge to say, but in that 1 district they can. So my sense is that the Secretary of State's office is waiting on guidance for that specifically, and the attorneys today said, hey, even if you do say no, we still got to talk about this. Can you say, but in the one district, those folks in basically the way they put it, in every other race that's not challenged, can please say the Secretary of State can certify those races. It's fascinating. And obviously we'll be back here talking about it next week again, because we'll have a judge's ruling and possibly Supreme Court arguments by then. And heck, man, I don't know, maybe even a Supreme Court decision. I don't know how fast they plan to both listen and rule. But let's move on to another congressional candidate, Eastern Iowa Democrat Christina Bohannon, the second attempt challenger to Republican incumbent McNett Miller Meeks in Eastern Iowa's 1st District. Bohannon recently held a public event at a private gun range where, after firing off a few rounds, she made the case that federal laws can both protect gun owners' rights and foster gun safety. Sarah, tell us a little bit more about that event, and what do you think Bohannon was hoping to achieve with it?
So she went to a basically the lawn of a Democratic candidate for Iowa House near Bluegrass, which is in and it was in Muscatine County. She was there with the Scott County Democratic candidate for sheriff, who's also a
sorry, Sarah. So I called it a private gun range. That's a stretch of the term. It was just somebody's front lawn.
Pretty much, yes. It was a
That's great.
property, like a farm, kind of a farm property. There was a like a plywood board set up along some trees with some targets that were pressed up to it. And they set up a like a chair for some of the bigger for one of the bigger guns. They set up like a chair and a table so that she could like line up the sights on the target. So yeah, so she shot three different types of guns and kind of learned about the 3 different types from the Scott County Democratic Sheriff candidate, Thomas Gibbs, who is a former firearms instructor. And so it seemed like her goal with the event was to demonstrate that she's comfortable using and learning about guns. She talked a lot about how she's a gun owner and she grew up using guns in a rural area in Florida. And she also talked a little bit about her policies as well, and that showing that Democrats are, especially rural Iowa Democrats, are many of them are gun owners, but also support some restrictions on guns and protections for the public safety. And so she praised a 2022 law that Congress passed. The loophole was closed and prevented domestic abusers from owning firearms, created more funding for states to implement red flag laws, and added some funding for school mental health programs, among other provisions. And she also made a point to emphasize that she supported expanding background checks, which have been required for buying a gun from a licensed dealer, but were recently expanded further for more unlicensed dealers, like if you purchase a gun at a gun show or online. But she says that there's still some ways to go with expanding background checks. But she stopped short of pledging any kind of support for a ban on certain types of weapons, such as semi-automatic assault style rifles or bump stocks. She said she was open to discussions about banning certain types of high-powered weapons, but that she was more focused about getting guns out of the hands of people who could pose a threat to themselves or others. McNett Miller Meeks, Christina Bohannon's opponent in the race and the incumbent congresswoman, she kind of pushed back on that, said Bohannon has voted against some gun protections, such as while she was in the Iowa House, such as the House File 756, which all Democrats in Iowa opposed at the time in 2021. And that was the one that reduced, or it eliminated the requirement to need a permit for carrying a gun in a public place, as long as
the permitless carry law. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So saying that Bohannon voted against that. So it was an interesting event. It was just her and the candidate for sheriff and one of her staffers and media, and I was the only media that came. It was
oh my gosh, are you serious?
Yes.
So did you get to fire some shots off then?
Did I? I did not. I did not. No, I didn't.
Wow.
But they did provide ear protection, which was nice. They
That's
were
good.
really loud. She shot a 9mm handgun, an AR-15 style rifle, and a 12-gauge shotgun. And that AR-15 was really loud.
I'm now thinking about what would have happened if you had been sick that day in the Quad Cities. And just never mind, guys. Oh wow. What are the Quad Cities TV stations doing? It couldn't have been that exciting a news that day.
Yeah, it was a Saturday.
Interesting.
I think it was just a little far away. It was like
probably
about
okay.
30 minutes from Central
Yeah,
Davenport.
okay.
So it was like
That's interesting.
it was in
That's-
rural Muscatine County, like just on the border.
And I apologize. It's an interesting story and topic. I apologize for getting hung up on the fact that only one reporter was there. But I can't help it. That's kind of funny. All right. Well, and I mean, you touched on it though, Sarah. I mean, she's a Democrat with a district that has a good chunk of rural voters. I mean, this is trying to portray herself as relatable to those kinds of folks, right?
Yes, yeah, she was definitely
Yeah.
trying to position herself as credible when talking about guns
Yeah.
and trying to take some of the bite out of Republican arguments that, oh, Democrats are afraid of guns or don't know anything about guns. And she was trying to provide a different position herself differently.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right. Let's skip across the state now and finish up this week in Western Iowa, where a Sioux City pastor had some fairly critical thoughts about Donald Trump's recent comments on abortion policy. For those of you who are not on the YouTubes, Jared cracked a smile when I used the term fairly critical. I might be underselling it. And by the way, and by the way, there's no ordinary, random, run-of-the-mill Sioux City pastor. He has a very significant history of activism in Iowa that I'll let Jared tell you all about and what he said this week.
So yeah, on August 30th or whatever last Friday was now, Harry Gordon, the politically outspoken senior pastor of Sioux City's Cornerstone World Outreach, slammed Trump for appearing to say that he would vote yes on a referendum for protecting access to abortion in Florida, where Trump is a registered voter. Trump told NBC that he thought 6 weeks was too short, that there has to be more time. And then when he was initially asked about voting on the ballot measure, Trump said, "I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks." And then since then, Trump's campaign has attempted to clarify the comments, and Trump has said he'll vote against the abortion measure. But that still has not been enough to mollify a number of anti-abortion groups. Gordon specifically, who people might remember from leading the 2010 effort to recall the Iowa Supreme Court justices who voted to legalize gay marriage, he tweeted, "I do not believe that Donald Trump will win the upcoming election. He doesn't deserve to win either. What he did and said in Florida yesterday is unforgivable. He's just an accessory to murder in the view of biblical law, have nothing in all caps, to do with this evil." So that was the most recent criticism.
So two things that I want to, one is that's not actually the first time Donald Trump has said that about the 6-week law. He actually said it. I can't remember if it was in Iowa or right before he came to Iowa for an event back during the primary last year. And it was around the time, I can't remember if it was shortly before or after Iowa's law went into effect, but I remember it being a big deal because he had kind of said that at the time when Iowa was implementing its 6-week ban. So he has actually said this before. The other thing here, and Jared, get your thought on this. I have heard people say like, wow, that was a really politically non-expedient thing for Donald Trump to say. That this could actually hurt him. This could keep some people on, the far reaches of that issue, could impact their vote. So the question is, one, assuming that's true, is there enough of those people for this to matter? Obviously not in Iowa, but 4 years ago, the election was decided in a handful of states by some very slim margins. Does something like this cause enough Republicans to sit on their hands in Michigan and Arizona and Georgia? Is this something that actually could hurt former President Trump's reelection?
I mean,
whatever you call this.
I mean, maybe so, because if you genuinely believe that that abortion is murder, and you have a candidate in your what tends to be your party saying that, that makes you have to take a lot harder look at voting for such a person, for equivocating on something that you hold as dearly as that. And, you know, obviously a number of these pastors, people hold in high regard, and they take not just spiritual advice from them, but like, you know,
That's a good point, too.
political
Yep.
advice as well. And so if your head pastor is saying something like that, that gives you, you know, cause for thought.
Yeah. That's why I think you're right. And I think that's interesting. But as we always say, who knows? It's September 5th, and who knows what voters will be pulling the lever for. But I mean, like, I think you said it exactly right, Jared. We're talking about the kind of voters, the kind of folks who, for that issue specifically, it is a all or nothing deal, and this was way in the wrong direction in their minds.
On a somewhat similar front, it's why I don't necessarily either think that all of like the RFK voters are automatically going to go to Trump now, because like there are people that are his voting base that genuinely think that the vaccine killed millions of people, and Donald Trump was the one responsible for helping push that out. So if you think that, I don't know why you would vote for the person who did that.
Yeah, similarly, it seems like that kind of voter would be more likely to just not vote for either rather than move from one candidate, right? Yeah.
I wonder if you think that this is maybe just like a scare tactic, like, or not a scare tactic, but like okay, if we can get enough voices to like try to push Trump further to the right on abortion and further pro-life by like threatening our power, you know, and influence over these voters, that they're trying to influence his position rather than actually like encouraging, you know, dissuading people from voting for him.
Maybe for some pastors, but with Gordon in particular, it's just that he does not like Trump, because he supported DeSantis in the Iowa caucus. And all the way back in 2015, Gordon took Trump to task for comments Trump made about the Kentucky County Clerk Kim Davis, who, you know, refused to grant marriage licenses to gay couples. Trump kind of equivocated on that in the eyes of conservative voters. And Gordon at that time on Facebook said, "Presidential candidates visiting Iowa better tread carefully on Kim Davis being jailed today. I consider it my pastoral duty to publicly excoriate any candidate who gets this situation wrong." So he has a history of not being a fan of Trump at all. And yeah, it doesn't seem like he's going to turn around on that.
No, interesting. All right. Well, that'll do it for this. Another great episode of On Iowa Politics. Never a dull moment around here. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice or on the YouTubes, where you should always also smash that like button. You also can find the podcast each week on your preferred Gazette or Lee newspaper website. And now that you've listened to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox you'll receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. Lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. For Tom Barton, Sarah Watson, Jared McNett, Todd Dorman, and our producer Bailey.cichon, enjoy your pumpkin spice latte, folks. I'm Erin Murphy. Everyone be well and be good.